Hello and welcome to another managerial special from the Honest Football Podcast. I'm joined by Craig and Charlie as always. And this time we've got a bit of a unique turn of events to talk about at Bradford City. It's not one that comes about often, but 4 games ago, Stuart McCall was sacked for the umpteenth time in that role at the club, alongside Kenny Black, who was his assistant. But today, following 10 points out of 12 in the last 4 games under caretaker duties, Mark Trueman and Connor Sellars, the men who were in charge of those 4, have been given the ongoing interim position as managers of the club for first team duties. Now, that was enough this morning, and the fact this has come a bit later in the day is lucky for us, because since then, they've also recruited Lee Turnbull as a new recruitment director, and that one's interesting enough as itself, because he only took another job 6 weeks before, so we'll get to all of that. But firstly, lads, let's do what we always do. We talk about the former managers, the one that have left. Obviously, Stuart McCall, a Bradford legend, has managed them a number of times, but they were on a poor run. They were right in a relegation scrap. And for a club like Bradford in League Two, that was never going to work, was it, Craig?
No, let's be honest. They're a big club. They're a former Premier League club. Obviously, this is 20-odd years ago now, but they're still technically a former Premier League club. And they could potentially have been the first Premier League club to actually be relegated out of the Football League since its inception. Yeah, the form was bad. Obviously, one of us tipped them to be up there this season. But,
we'll get to that.
But yeah, it was just on a real bad run of form. And to be honest, the sacking doesn't surprise me.
No, you're absolutely spot on, Craig. I completely understand that. And Charlie, I mean, we know that Stuart McCall's a club legend, and you were the man, as Craig says, that tipped them to be in the playoffs. So you probably more than most must have been quite pleased to see there was a change.
Well, yeah, he won, I think it's 7 in 29, which, you know, it's not the worst record for a League Two club who's maybe come up from the National League or has a smaller budget or is a smaller club. That, you know, you'd take that. And we spoke about it in a different special a few days ago. It's about your expectations as a club. And I think everyone's expectation, at the very least, is a club like Bradford should not be in League Two, should be a much higher. So on that basis, is that good enough? Not for a club like Bradford. And I don't like using that sort of term. But no matter how much of a legend you are, that can only protect you so far. That can only get you so far. So for me, it was the right decision. I mean, in terms of my prediction for them, we'll probably move on to that a little bit. They flattered the seed the last couple of years, not just under McCall, but, you know, prior to that. So there's something else going on, I think, a little bit, because it's a good squad of players. It's not necessarily the best in League Two. It's a good squad of players, you know. So I am surprised they're as low as they are, but we'll probably move on to why in a bit.
Yeah, you're spot on with that as well. And Craig, I'll come back to you because it's something you mentioned. Bradford, a bigger club with higher expectations. I mean, I remember just a couple of years ago going to a Luton game away there on a Tuesday night, and there was, 12, 13, 14,000 people there, and they were struggling then. So whoever takes charge, and these 2 interim guys, and if it's somebody else longer term, they've certainly got the base of a very big club to work with.
Yeah, exactly. We don't really want to go back from past glories like they just did for the Premier League, but they were in the League Cup final 7 years ago. Yeah. And they were in League Two then. The expectation for Bradford is to be up there. They've got a big fan base, and I know they recently got relegated from League One a couple of seasons ago, and they've just been on that steady decline, and it's quite sad to see, really.
It is a shame to see Bradford in that position, but of course we've got to look to the future now, because 2 interim managers have been put in caretaker charge for 4 games, 10 points out of 12. So I guess, given the sort of financial insecurity in the lower ends of the EFL at the moment, given the January window just around the corner, and given the upturn in form, Charlie, is it any surprise that Bradford have just said, well, let's stick with what we're doing?
Well, yeah, it was a question I was going to ask you lads more as well, is really, it's all well and good sort of getting rid of a manager, but who are you going to replace him with? And actually, is there anyone else of quality out there who you could think could probably do a better job than what they've done? Because that's the whole point of it. You're only going to employ someone who's going to do a better job than someone you're already employing within reason. Do you know what I mean? So I don't like using the cliche of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But there is an element of that. If they're getting the best out of this squad of players, why would you potentially rock the boat, and why would you potentially want to upset that good vein of form they're in? It is a bit of a no-brainer to keep them on. The short term, that's obviously we spoke about new manager bounces and all of that. I'm not saying they're getting that with this. Short term, they've done well. I think their test as a manager will be come May time. But obviously, you know how it's going to play out. But the point is that'll be a real test of how well the players are responding to them. But initial sort of steps seem to be, you know, it's all going in the right direction. So as a business owner or manager, as a chairman, why would you want to change it, really? It's all going in the right direction compared to what it was before.
And moving back to you, Craig, the last time, and I know we've got different views on this because we've had a chat about it before, but the last time there was a long-term interim manager in the EFL, it was Mick Harford at Luton Town 2 years ago, who took over from Nathan Jones, albeit in a different position in January. But he then won the league. He got manager of the season in the EFL. surely this is possibly a pretty good thing for Bradford because there's no financial attachment, there's no contractual attachment, and these interim coaches, if they don't do so well, can just go back to their youth academy roles. Surely it's a no-brainer.
From a business point of view, yes. I think the difference with obviously Mick Harford and obviously with this one with Bradford is Mick Harford knows the club. So it's very easy to, and once you're top of the table, when they're on that run of real good form, and Luton went 28 games unbeaten, and Mick Harford was there for probably half of them. So yeah, it's totally different of the vibe. When you're in a losing momentum, it's very hard to get back into winning ways. And to their credit, and to interim managers, they've done well. They've got, as you said, 10 points out of 12. But the problem is when you get that and you all right, we're going to make you permanent, sometimes it doesn't actually go as what you think you had beforehand. Prime example, I'm not obviously using Premier League, but I'm going to use Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Once Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was interim manager, Man United, he was the winning game. They come from behind against PSG. But as soon as he said, right, you're now permanent manager, the form just dipped dramatically, maybe because the pressure was off. And my worry is for them is, right, they had nothing to lose when they took over from Stuart McCall. Now they've actually got the job. All right, interim, but they've got the job. My worry is, right, there's a bit more pressure on them, and then they start making the same mistakes as probably what Stuart McCall did.
No, I was just going to say that in terms of, I know what you're saying about Hartford knowing the club, but these lads, Mark Trueman was the under-18s manager, so there's invested interest in this club. You know, it's a fairly young squad. I take out Clayton Donaldson, who's 36, I think, and Lee Novak. On the whole, it's a younger squad, so these players would have come across them at some point or another. The point I'm sort of making is that it's not like they're getting like you mentioned Solskjaer from the outside, although he was a player. These lads are already in the ethos of the club. They're, I'd imagine a decent football team would have the under-18s playing the same way that the first team does, as an example. So it's not as big a transition to go from one to the other in terms of obviously playing styles, etc. So there is that part that I think will go in their favour. I suppose because they're coming from that background, actually, if they do mess up, they're going to, it's a bit of a free hit for them. They're only under-18s managers before this. Do you know what I mean? It's not like they were like Solskjaer as an example. You were saying he come from Molde, he's already managed somewhere else. Do you know what I mean? Whereas these lads, really, no one's expecting anything from them. So it's all a bit of a bonus, in my opinion. But yeah. My
worry is if they're going to be a bit naive. Obviously, just because they haven't got the experience of managing in the EFL, of managing, probably, I'll say adult football, if they've just done under-18 football. So yeah, it's a massive step up. And obviously, yeah, credit to obviously getting 10 points out of 12. But could they do it for the long run?
Well, I guess you two have quite led on to my next point, which was sort of the risks of it, really, which is it can go wrong. They're both men that haven't managed in senior football before. They both had pretty limited playing careers in non-league and have only coached at youth level at Bradford. So there are risks on that front. I guess keeping the word interim in, I guess, does give them something to strive for of becoming the permanent long-term manager afterwards. But I guess coming back to you, Charlie, is the second part of this story is Lee Turnbull then comes in as recruitment advisor. Now, he joined Chesterfield just 6 weeks or so ago, a club he used to play for, set up a lot of stuff there for January, and he's now a very experienced football man coming into the job to try and support them on the off-the-field issues. So are they almost saying at Bradford, you two coach the team and don't worry about the rest? And perhaps is that another sensible move?
Well, yeah, I think it is, to be honest, because when you look at it from a football perspective, if you've come from under-18s football where essentially, within reason, you're not worried about budgets, you're not worried about this, that and the other, it is essentially the football and development of a player as an individual, but also as a team. Actually, if that's what your forte is and they're very good at it, which clearly, that's why they've been pushed up. I mean, Connor Sellars' dad was Scott Sellars, obviously he's played for Newcastle and stuff, so that football background anyway, really, if that's all you know, maybe stick to that. What I'm saying is there's no point trying to put a round peg in a square hole. If you've got someone who knows the budgets, that's how to deal with, for example, I'm going to use an example, how to deal with agents, how to deal with the press and all of that, get someone to take care of that and they'll just do what they are capable of doing. And let's be honest, it is a period of transition, getting rid of a manager for a club like Bradford wanting to be higher up the league. So it just makes sense to use people for where their forte is. And if that's their forte is the tactical and the technical side of the game, then why bother trying to hinder that by giving them all the extra stuff when you don't need to? What I would say is it's not too dissimilar in a sense of the whole McLaren Wayne Rooney thing, and that seems to have come off, or in the sense of, obviously I know it's slightly different careers, but Wayne Rooney, I'd imagine, is just doing the football side, and McLaren will cope with all the other bits. So it's not massively different from that in that sense.
No, you're spot on there. And Craig, I want to come back to you because you talked about them flattering to deceive the last couple of years. Things haven't been going so well on the pitch. Arguably, is the recruitment of this and sorting out the off-the-pitch stuff, is that arguably more important as the two announcements today? Is that recruitment director the more important one?
It looks like the past signings haven't been good enough.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be in that position. And it's not purely from a financial point of view, because obviously everyone's in the same financial problem, obviously with the pandemic going on. I think from a recruitment point of view, it's a sensible decision. Obviously, the two novice managers, they're not going to attract the players that they probably would want. My worry is who they actually want and what the recruitment manager probably wants. So they've got to work together and find a way. Just, it doesn't have to be, obviously, spend a lot of money. It's to find the best player to suit for their style of play. From that point of view, it's a sensible decision. It's, from a Chesterfield point of view, it's a kick in the teeth. But at the moment, they seem to be doing all right.
Yeah. Charlie, coming back to you, the final one I want to ask before we go to our favourite question at the end is about this interim manager role, because it's something that's always surprised me lower down the EFL that it isn't used more often. Now, with the current financial situation, with the sort of expected problems the pandemic's going to cause for the next year or two, do you think Bradford are almost joining Luton and going to be trendsetters in the future? Do you see this temporary interim or ongoing interim role happening more often now?
It depends what your expectation of the club is. I think in this sense of maybe for now it's just to steady the ship. But yeah, I don't see a problem with it. If there's no one else available, why bother? You've seen so many other clubs, I won't name them, but higher up in the Championship, who've gone through a cycle of managers which hasn't worked. I suppose what I'm getting at is yes, if it's working for you now, then I can't understand. It's been a blueprint that's worked at Luton, where you had someone coming in as we all been ingrained in the club's ethos. It's a bit of a free hit for them. It's a free hit for the club, because if it doesn't work out well, all we've got to fall back on, it was an interim, it was just to tide us over until we got manager X who comes in September or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So I think I don't see a problem with it, and it is a cheaper option. I don't imagine, and it's not my place to judge contracts, I don't imagine these lads are getting extra money for taking the first team. You know, they'll probably still be on their youth team manager wages, etc. So it makes sense, really. Why not in a time when you're struggling? If it reaps results that they've been getting, then it's a bit of a no-brainer for me.
I completely agree. And I guess we have to finish now with the big question, which we always do. I'm going to come to you first, Craig, because when these guys took over, Bradford were in a relegation scrap. They're now 7 points off the relegation zone and 8 points off the playoffs, just 4 games later. That shows you how close lots of these leagues are. So you, like me, had them neither in the top 7 nor in a relegation scrap. Do you see that being the same, or do you have higher, loftier ambitions for Bradford now?
I don't have any higher expectations of Bradford. My worry is if they do lose a game, if they go on that rotten form again, how them two are going to sort out again. They've done it once, can they do it again? I'll say bottom half of the League Two. I think they'll take that. Hopefully, they've really started planning someone in for the summer. Maybe a Bill Parkinson again. Might as well get him back.
I was going to mention that name.
You might as well get him back. So yeah, I think bottom half. I don't think they'll be in trouble.
And coming over to you, Charlie, of course, you had them sneaking in 7th place into the playoffs. Now, you've got a bold decision to make here, because if this run continues, there is every possibility you could look like a genius at the end of the year. Craig's got his feet up ready for the answer. So what's going to happen?
Well, I genuinely think the recruitment role is important, and they've done it just in time for January. You know, I'll be honest, they lost a few goals when they, in the sense of, James Vaughan went to Tranmere, for example. They never really replaced that kind of calibre. But there's also been teams above that have been massively outperformed. I mean, Cambridge United, no one gave them a hope of being up there and there. Yeah. What I'm saying is that we're talking about Bradford underperforming. There's been a lot of teams overperforming. Can they do that for a whole season, So they're only 8 points off Cambridge as an example. Will they make the playoffs? If they do, I think it won't be higher than 7th. It'll be a last day job sort of thing. But for me, they've got an experienced recruitment person. You're going to have these lads who are keen. And that's the big difference for me. In League Two, I think a lot of enthusiasm can get you a long way in that league. These lads, they've already saw it in the interview after one game. They spent the next 7 hours planning for the next one. I'm not saying Stuart McCall wasn't doing that, but he's so long in the tooth, would you need to? And I suppose sometimes that enthusiasm, that motivates players. It's infectious, especially your younger lads, if they've got a fairly young squad. So I'm going to be bold. 7th place, yes, they'll make it. I'm,
as always, not going to sit on the fence. I will give you my opinion to finish as well. And I probably edging closer to Charlie's, to be honest. I don't think they will finish in the playoffs. And I'm happy to be proven wrong, because it's going to be very tight. But I can see them being in the playoff picture towards the end of the season. So I think they're going to finish in the top half. I think they'll probably be somewhere between sort of 8th and 10th. The recruitment in January is key. Of course, the salary cap restricts what any size club can do in League One and League Two now. But I've got a feeling that Bradford are going to have a good season. And then I think they'll get a 1-year deal in the summer. So I'm going to stick with that. But that's all for this episode. Craig's not happy with me. If you did enjoy this episode, please do put a thumbs up on it. If you're a Bradford fan, of course, let us know what you think, because the last 4 games have been very good. Let us know in the comment section down below. Subscribe to the channel for regular content from the podcast, including matchday championship predictions, interviews with pros, and much, much more. Thank you to Charlie and Craig for joining me as always. You can follow us on Twitter at HonestFootball3, and we'll see you next time.